Dr. Sydney Savion has been instrumental in shaping iconic global workforces and workplaces. In her 20 plus years of executive experience at Air New Zealand, Dell Technologies, Booz Allen Hamilton and the US Air Force, she has led broad transformation, optimization and sustainability initiatives across industry sectors ranging from consulting, computing, aerospace to emerging markets.
Hi Sydney, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome to the Hobson Levy Leadership Series. It's fantastic to have your comments, and we're just going to have a really relaxed conversation about some of the challenges and things that you've experienced as a leader through this last 16-month period, which has definitely been unprecedented in New Zealand and globally.
Kia ora, Carrie. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Wow, gosh. Been such an unusual last 16 months. Phenomenal, really. And I wanted to sort of start our conversation around some of the challenges that you had as a very senior leader working at the executive team within one of New Zealand's largest organisations that could not have been more heavily impacted by the coronavirus and the challenges around the lockdown that's happened globally. So yeah, Sydney, over to you. What were the biggest challenges as a leader?
Well, let me start with this because I believe that many of the biggest challenges in 2020 still confront us today.
Yeah.
When you think about here we are a year later and the COVID-19 pandemic is still very much part of our daily lives. You think about we're well over 150 million cases and 3 million deaths worldwide. And we still are challenged with a slow, fumbling, kind of fear-riddled response to the pandemic. So what I would say is that some of those challenges still exist today. And some of my thoughts really are inspired by this New York Times best-selling author Dan Heath's book called Upstream, the quest for solving problems before they happen. And I would bucket the 2020 challenges into two themes. I would say operational and people. Operational, Carrie, because I feel like we got stuck in a reactive response cycle, firefighting, everything from the supply chain to customer service to customer experience, fears from our people. And I feel like we were just stuck downstream, handling one problem after another, rather than upstream trying to fix the system or the source that created that problem. And as it relates to people, I say there are 5 things or 5 themes I would bucket the challenges in. That would be safety, self-care, inspiration, communication, and connection. As it relates to safety, just that, concern for our families, our employees, our colleagues, our customers. As it relates to self-care, practicing self-care as a leader.
Yes.
But also promoting well-being for our families, our employees, and our colleagues. As it relates to inspiration, it's that balance between being an inspirational and comforting leader while also driving performance and outcomes, even in a very difficult time. And as it relates to communication, I mean, everybody knows we were kind of hammered with so many questions and concerns from employees and customers when we really didn't have any clear answers at the time.
Yeah.
And then lastly, connection is related to during lockdown. You know, I think a lot of people felt quite isolated and this sense of losing their strength of connections while also trying to maintain visibility and influence when we have very limited interaction opportunities. So those would be the things that I would say were the big challenges of 2020, and I believe some of those still confront us today.
Absolutely. In fact, actually, I was recently reading that we possibly are facing the hardest part of this whole pandemic as we start to open up and our boundaries and borders become a little bit more transparent and we become a little bit more relaxed about what the challenges could be with respect to COVID. We don't respect it as much and we think we've been vaccinated. Some people are travelling when they've only had one vaccine, not the other vaccine, and it could actually be quite challenging in the next medium term.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's right. The challenges of leading an organisation, particularly one like in New Zealand, where a lot of the employees are on a plane.
Right.
They're right in the
mix.
middle of the crisis.
Yeah.
And making them feel safe must have been pretty challenging, and helping them to sort of navigate through that, let alone just the complexity of trying to rearrange everybody's travel bookings and to manage how you were going to pay back what should have been paid back because they didn't go on the trip or whatever. I mean, the logistics must have been enormous. Yeah.
Yes, it was quite a challenge.
Real challenge. So, sort of leading up from that, what do you think have been some learnings from all of this?
I'm going to say 3 from my point of view. One is clearly about just that high attention and intention to doing best by our employees.
Yeah.
The second is just that crisp, honest, clear, regular, and adaptive communication to not only employees but to our customers. And then lastly, I would say just more focus on using visioning capability, as well as focusing more efforts upstream to prevent problems from happening. I think those would be the 3 lessons, big lessons, that I would say I've taken away from 2020.
I think the other thing that, if I reflect on our New Zealand leadership, some parts of the world would say that we were a little bit lucky.
Yes.
And I don't mind that. That's okay.
Right.
Because when you think about the privilege we have of even being able to do something like this today, I attended my father-in-law's funeral last week with 130 people there. I mean, it was a sad occasion, but it was a real celebration.
Right.
And there are many people around the world that haven't been able to even send off their loved ones or say farewell in a dignified way, which I think in places like Italy, etc., has just been horrendous, let alone what's happening in India.
Right.
So I do think, though, our leaders really listened to the experts. And if I think of one of the learnings for me when I look at some of the leaders, it has been to actually have confidence in those epidemiologists and the science, and actually say, what is best practice here? It might not feel very nice to have to lock down the whole nation, but actually we need to have that confidence. So I suppose it's almost like moving with intent and making decisions with as much focused information as you can, but recognising that if it's not right, change it quickly. But none of this halfway house. I think in New Zealand we went down hard and fast, and a lot of people were not happy about that. But a virus doesn't know any sort of halfway house.
That's right.
And that's been the challenge. In the US, there's this desire to be free and nobody wants to be locked down. But in New Zealand, I think the team of 5 million was a fantastic concept, that we were all in this together. And it's fair, and we all have to do it. And if we do, we'll be able to come through more quickly.
Which we're living benefactors of that 5 million team. Team of 5 million that actually really did the hard yards early on to give us this freedom. There's the saying, freedom isn't free, and so and I think we did the hard yards to have the freedom we have today.
And the other thing I also feel is that in New Zealand, 80% of New Zealand businesses employ less than 20 people, or something like that. So there's a lot of small business. And I know, as an operator of a small business myself, an owner, having the confidence that the government would support us through that was just such a comfort. And I think it was remarkable, the mechanics of government, how they actually managed to say they were going to give us a subsidy, and it arrived in my bank account a couple of days later, was amazing. So acting with intent and delivering on what they said they'd do. But there's a lot of... So there's some learnings, I suppose, in the broader concept around leadership and how we corral our members, how we all say it's cohesive. We were all in it together.
Right, I love it.
And we have to be collaborative and look out for one another. And if we do that, then we will survive, hopefully.
And thrive. I feel like,
Yeah.
New Zealand compared to other countries, we're thriving. And part of that thriving is not just about the economy, but the freedom to move about the world, and whether you want to do your exercising, go to the beach or whatever, enjoy this majestic backdrop of New Zealand. And I think that's the other part of what we were able to achieve here. So it's good.
So what are the opportunities, do you think? Tell us what, we've sort of talked about learnings, that we're adaptable, we've used technology in the most effective way. What are the opportunities going forward? Things like flexible work practice, what does it mean?
Maybe there are 4 or 5 things I would say. One would be, I'm going to go back to this notion of upstream, is look upstream first and fast. Teaching our leaders to focus their efforts on preventing problems before they happen. I think the second thing I'd go to is, this drive or cultivating continuous learning. I think learning is so important. In addition to that, it's putting more rigor around best practices. So once we learn what's working well, starting to introduce that and share that across the company, across the country, in fact. The third thing is around, I think you talked about this, is building a new trust contract with our employees around flexibility of work, or where, what, when, and how they're going to do work, given the current circumstances. The fourth thing I would say is around this notion of fostering hope, but also forging the courage to make those transformational changes to operations, leadership, and the digital ecosystem while we have the chance. And lastly, I think it's around just reimagining this notion of a system of prevention and preparedness rather than recovery. Again, going back to the heart of focusing upstream on prevention. And I think that, learning is going to be a key fundamental to the equation going forward. It should have been before, but I think even more so now. So that's what I think are the biggest opportunities going forward.
Framing that a little bit in context with New Zealand and for New Zealand businesses, I feel as if we are in a really exciting phase, because we are perceived to have had robust leadership, and that is very appealing from a business investment perspective. We are perceived internationally as being clean, green, having this environmental sustainability focus, plus also as a really trustworthy place to actually execute business.
Right.
And some of that might be 100% true, some of it might be partially true.
Right.
But I feel that New Zealand's business has got an opportunity to really leverage that now, and that window may not be there for a long time.
True.
And so, how do we take ourselves to the world?
Right.
And how do we actually, maybe we become, the fact that we're at the bottom of the world doesn't matter when you've got technology.
Right.
So maybe we do things like have Silicon Valley of the South Pacific.
Ooh, I love it.
What do you think?
I love it. You heard it here first, folks.
You know. I reckon it's, well, I don't know. I mean, look, you can imagine. Let's visualize, let's really think about these things.
Right.
And as a leader and, being engaged with a lot of business, how do we really stand up now and go, you know what? We're a great country. We've got outstanding business. Predominantly, we're an agricultural-based business or economy. But maybe now it's time to sort of change some of that. And there's a lot of desire to invest in New Zealand, but I'm not sure that will last. Like, it might not be here in 5 years' time. We may not have that competitive advantage.
Right. And I think there's a couple things. I think COVID-19 has certainly been an accelerant of change on many different levels. It's certainly been an accelerant of New Zealand's popularity around the world because of the way we've handled COVID. I think also, to your point, even though New Zealand is looked at as green, not just green in terms of COVID free, but green in terms of our sustainability efforts and how we take care of the land and take care of our people. I think there's a thirst for that, Carrie, around the world, and I think that because now New Zealand is like the beacon on the hill for the way we, have handled COVID, the way we take care of the land, our views on sustainability, the way we take care of people. I do feel like it's more of a magnet. We don't really, I don't feel like now we need to invite people as much as people now are drawn. I mean, people are trying to get into New Zealand.
That's true.
Companies, individuals. So it's not like there's any shortage of people now lined up, I guess just to ask Immigration New Zealand, to get into New Zealand. I think, talking about taking advantage, I think part of it in this instance is, while this window is here, is maybe there's an opportunity for Kiwis to actually self-promote. I know that's not typical, but I think in this instance, self-promoting in the interest of the nation, I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think it is really okay.
That's okay.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Probably our biggest challenge is actually managing that magnet and saying, who do we want? And what sort of investment do we want? And how do we be quite, focused about that?
And selective.
And and our government and immigration and all of that can actually be quite targeted about what sort of industry we might like to have and what's going to be effective. So I guess the leaders are starting to think about that, but wouldn't it be great if we had a think tank around that kind of stuff?
I like another first here, folks, think tank. And it's going to be led by Carrie Hobson.
Thank you so much, Sydney. It's been fun to have a chat with you today.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your time, and I hope you've enjoyed being part of our first leadership
Absolutely,
series.
my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.